You can't have a Christmas episode without Santa Claus. Well, I guess you can, but let's just be honest. All of the best Christmas stories and Christmas episodes include Santa Claus. And in the Family Guy universe, we have had plenty of specials and seen Santa Claus quite a few times. But what if I tell you that these were all the same Santa and we can actually follow his timeline throughout all of the different shows? Well, I believe that I've put this all together, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire story of Santa Claus in the Family Guy universe. But hey, before we get going on to this video, guys, if you haven't seen my last video, our channel had a goal this year of reaching 1,000 subscribers by Christmas, and we actually did it, and we have actually passed it. We are now at 1,005 subs, and I cannot tell you how awesome it is and how appreciative I am of all of you people who have watched like my shorts and my videos and all these things. I really do put a lot of hard work into them, and to have so many people like it enough to where they actually decide to subscribe means the world to me. But just for a little bit of icing on the cake, I wonder how high we could get it. Honestly, I would be happy if we just got 1,010, and that would be great, but it would just be the icing on the cake. We've only got a couple weeks left before Christmas anyway. But like I said, I'm very appreciative, and now let's get into this video. So, the earliest we see Santa in the timeline is in a flashback story being told by Abe Simpson in The Simpsons Season 17, Episode 9, Simpsons Christmas Story, where Santa actually has a run-in with Abe Simpson and Mr. Burns when they are stranded on an island in World War II. Burns actually thought he was a Japanese combatant and shot him down. Then, feeling sorry about the misunderstanding, they actually help him fix the sleigh, collect his presents, and most of his reindeer. But before he could take off, Burns knocks him out with a coconut and steals his sleigh with all of his presents. Abe manages to catch him by riding Prancer and beats Mr. Burns up with a tricycle. He then gives Santa his sleigh back, and Santa promises that he would be back for them once he was done with his deliveries, but he actually never comes back. This caused Abe to want to basically get back at Santa, and he tries to trap him every year at Christmas going forward. But then the episode jumps to modern day, where Abe is telling the story, and Santa actually does return to the Simpsons house, telling Abe that his brother, who was shot down the war, is actually still alive and living happily in Tahiti. He also tells Grandpa that he didn't come back with him because he has a procrastination problem. And they kind of just make up their relationship right there. However, the encounter with Mr. Burns, as well as his procrastination problem, will affect his life pretty heavily down the line, but we're going to get to that when we get to it. Because the next time we see Santa is in Family Guy, where in Season 4, Episode 22, Sibling Rivalry, he is actually peeping on a couple having sex before trying to join in. But his debauchery actually doesn't end there, since after that, we see him get busted for drunk driving in Season 7, Episode 13, Steroids. Then, following that up in the Cleveland show, Season 1, Episode 9, A Cleveland Brown Christmas, he's actually seen standing outside of Cleveland's house, laughing about a black Santa, and being violated by a reindeer that the kids have set free. Comeuppets. After this, though, Santa would actually go to Langley Falls, Virginia, in American Dad Season 6, Episode 7, For Whom the Sleigh Bell Tolls. Unfortunately for him, he would be shot outside while smoking a cigarette by Steve Smith, who hit him through a snowman. At the time, they didn't even know this was the real Santa, and the Smiths actually bury him in the woods. Although after this, his elves would dig him up and bring him back to the North Pole, putting him in essentially a Bacta tank from Star Wars in order to heal him. And while he was healing, his elves were actually sending messages to the Smiths telling them that he was on his way for revenge. Now, why they were doing that doesn't necessarily make that much sense, because although the tank could heal his body, his spirit was completely broken at this point. And you see, while this was going on, Brian and Stewie were actually headed to the North Pole in Family Guy Season 9, Episode 7, Road to the North Pole. They would find Santa basically right after he got out of the tank, looking really skinny and sickly and pretty much on death's door. As a matter of fact, he actually welcomes Stewie trying to kill him, just being done with life and everything at this point. We actually find out that the past problems we've seen Santa have are actually his coping mechanisms for his workload. And the fact that he was probably procrastinating and fell behind. He explains that the world's population has gotten so big that he is actually just struggling to keep up, and the elves that work in the factory are all inbred since he started out with a single family, and the reindeer had started actually eating the elves when they go outside to die. But after this, Santa would pretty much pass out, with his elf doctor saying he simply cannot keep this pace up, and that it will most likely kill him. Santa even says he will be with Allah soon, which actually kind of freaks Stewie out a little bit. Brian and Stewie would then try to take over for Santa, which actually did not go so well, with them basically ruining Christmas. But once they left, and before he died, Santa would try and get his revenge on the Smiths. Finding them hiding out at a moonshiner's cabin, here he attacks the Smiths with literally an army of elves and reindeer and snowmen, nearly killing them until Jeff actually stabs him with his Golden Compass polar bear helmet. He may not have succeeded here, but he does threaten to get the Smiths next year. Now, this probably was going to be an empty threat, seeing as every other indication we've had thus far is that Santa will not make it another year. Or this might have kind of reinvigorated a little bit of like drive for Santa having something to do. The important part here is, though, is this actually puts him back on death's door when Brian and Stewie would show up to the world on Christmas morning, showing them the state that Santa was in and convincing the world to only ask for one present every year. This would significantly lighten Santa's workload, but he would never quite forgive humanity. And now look, I know what you guys are going to say. This can't be the same Santa because the elves aren't inbred, the reindeer are different, and he wasn't big, and to that I say, good point. But not all of the elves were inbred. I mean, if you see, the doctor elf looks just fine and a lot like the ones we actually see in American Dad. And I mean, he can have multiple reindeer. The song just talks about, like, you know, the famous ones, but he can have multiple reindeer. And also, let's just not forget one thing, guys. This is just for funsies. If you don't like my timeline, make your own, and it can be just as good because it's not real. Now, where were we? After this, though, he finds out that Jesus is Jewish in Season 9, Episode 8, Minstrel Krampus and American Dad. And if you guys want, the next video is actually going to be all about Krampus. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when that video comes out. But we then find out in Season 12, Episode 7, 90 North, 0 West, that with all of his free time, he has been kidnapping children and having them work in a mine, uncovering the Sumerian god Humbaba to gain the ultimate power. I guess he is still holding a grudge, or maybe this Santa has just always been bad. I don't know, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But for a quick rundown of these events, he ends up actually reviving the god, gets himself and most of the North Pole sucked into the god before it gets beheaded by Steve. But Santa did manage to escape, squaring revenge against the Smiths again, but falling and breaking his neck. Then he is actually drugged around by Roger. All of this takes place in Season 13, Episode 1, Santa Schmanta. Roger would then become Santa, but abuses his power because he does. I mean, he's Roger. And then the Smiths reanimate Santa, but it doesn't fully work until they put his suit back on him. They try to reason with him, but ultimately end up running him over with the car, causing Santa to swear revenge on the Smiths for a third time. But then after this, we see him consoling Rudolph, then getting upset that Rudolph was talking to Mrs. Claus in Family Guy Season 14, Episode 2, Papa Has a Rollin' Son. Then, after this, he actually gets involved in a prank war against Peter in Season 15, Episode 9, How the Griffins Stole Christmas, when Peter starts abusing his power as a mall Santa and then refuses to stop, ultimately ending when he tries to actually strangle Peter. That's just when they decide, okay, the feud is done. Then, when Stan is afraid of losing his King of the Presents title to Steve in Season 18, Episode 22, Into the Jingleverse, he makes a deal with Santa to beta test some virtual reality goggles called Jingle Goggles. This works at first, however, they eventually realize that Santa has just trapped them in there, telling them that they will be beta testers in his game till Santa uses it essentially on the entire world. That is until Stan starts passing gas from his intolerance to eggnog and convincing the elves they should just take over as Santa, and they trap him in the virtual reality Jingleverse. But that's pretty much the end of the full Santa story with the Smiths. As far as we know, we haven't seen him again, so the odds are actually good, however, that he does not get released. See, once Santa has been trapped, and he's probably could potentially still be trapped, we actually don't know, the elves would then go on to found the Friendly Robot Company in 2801, and they would eventually realize that they actually need Santa, so they tried to make a robot Santa that could judge whether someone was naughty or nice, and then give them out either presents or punishments accordingly. And we learn all of this in Season 2, Episode 4 of Futurama, A Christmas Story. Unfortunately though, potentially due to the professor time traveling. His standards were set way too high, and he deems everyone to be naughty. So he only dishes out punishments, usually in the form of lethal Christmas-themed weapons that are made in his factory on Neptune by the Neptunians, essentially replacing the elves. But then, we see him essentially just popping up every Christmas. In the first Christmas, he tries to kill Fry until he is actually stopped by Dr. Zoidberg. Then Bender and Leela actually trap him in ice and try to bring Christmas back to the way it was. But everybody just keeps attacking Bender, so eventually Santa just comes out and just takes them all out anyway, essentially just keeping Xmas the same. He then would try and take out the scammers along with the Kwanzaa and Hansa bots, and his final appearance in the timeline so far is potentially when Professor Zoidberg and Bender have some Christmas time travel shenanigans, which ultimately includes Santa not being stopped and his naughty meter being set too high. It's just kind of like a whole thing, which may also actually not be canon. But that is as far as we can go into the year 3024. And that is the entire timeline of Santa Claus in the Family Guy universe. But hey, let me know if you guys think, did I get any of this wrong? Was it all just a complete waste of my time? Or did you just kind of enjoy me combining all the different Santas into this one fluid story and explaining how there are these kind of different versions of Santa we see across the entire Family Guy universe? Let me know all that in the comments down below, and while you guys are down there, please remember to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so you never miss another video from me, and I will see you guys in the next video.